Namaskar. Today we're reading in Book 2, Canto 10, the kingdoms and godheads of the little mind. And we'll be reading from line 407 on page 248 to line 500 on page 252. I don't have any questions from last week, but there are quite some difficult words in the passage I'll read today. So you can note down anything you like to ask, and I'll try and deal with it at the end. We're reading about the 3 powers of the little mind. And first we read about this little strong little dwarf, the physical mind. And last time we read about the hunchback rider on the red wild ass that carries the life mind away on all kinds of adventures. But of these 3 powers, the poet says, of all these powers, the greatest was the last, arriving late from a far plane of thought into a packed, irrational world of chance, where all was grossly felt and blindly done, yet the haphazard seemed the inevitable. Came reason, the squat Godhead artisan, to her narrow house upon a ridge in time. Adept of clear contrivance and design, a pensive face and close and peering eyes, she took her firm and irremovable seat, the strongest, wisest of the troll-like 3. Armed with her lens and measuring rod and probe, she looked upon an object universe and the multitudes that in it live and die, and the body of space, and the fleeing soul of time, and took the earth and stars into her hands to try what she could make of these strange things. In her strong, purposeful, laborious mind, inventing her scheme lines of reality and the geometric curves of her time plan, she multiplied her slow half-cuts at truth. Impatient of enigma and the unknown, intolerant of the lawless and unique, imposing reflection on the march of force, imposing clarity on the unfathomable. She strove to reduce to rules the mystic world. Nothing she knew, but all things hoped to know. In dark, inconscient realms, once void of thought, missioned by a supreme intelligence to throw its ray upon the obscure vast. An imperfect light leading an erring mass by the power of sense and the idea and word. She ferrets out nature's process, substance, cause. All life to harmonize by thought's control, she, with the huge imbroglio, struggles still. Ignorant of all but her own seeking mind, to save the world from ignorance she came. A sovereign worker through the centuries, observing and remolding all that is, confident she took up her stupendous charge. There the low, bent and mighty figure sits, bowed under the arc lamps of her factory home, amid the clatter and ringing of her tools. A rigorous stare in her creative eyes, coercing the plastic stuff of cosmic mind. She sets the hard inventions of her brain in a pattern of eternal fixity. Indifferent to the cosmic dumb demand, unconscious of two close realities, of the unspoken thought, the voiceless heart. She leans to forge her credos and iron codes and metal structures to imprison life, and mechanic models of all things that are. For the world seen, she weaves a world conceived. She spins in stiff but unsubstantial lines her gossamer word webs of abstract thought, her segment systems of the infinite, her theodicies and cosmogonic charts, and myths by which she explains the inexplicable. At will, she spaces in thin air of mind, like maps in the schoolhouse of intellect hung, forcing wide truth into a narrow scheme. Her numberless, warring, strict philosophies. Out of nature's body of phenomenon, she carves with thought's keen edge in rigid lines like rails for the world magician's power to run. her sciences, precise and absolute. On the huge bare walls of human nescience, written round nature's deep, dumb hieroglyphs, she bends in clear demotic characters the vast encyclopedia of her thoughts, an algebra of her mathematic signs, her numbers and unerring formulas she builds to clinch her summary of things. On all sides runs, as if in a cosmic mosque, tracing the scriptural verses of her laws, the daedal of her patterned arabesques, art of her wisdom, artifice of her lore. This art, this artifice, are her only stock. In her high works of pure intelligence, in her withdrawal from the senses trap, there comes no breaking of the walls of mind. There leaps no rending flash of absolute power. There dawns no light of heavenly certitude. A million faces wears her knowledge here, and every face is turbaned with a doubt. All now is questioned, all reduced to naught. Once monumental in their massive craft, her old great mythic writings disappear, and into their place start strict ephemeral signs. This constant change spells progress to her eyes. Her thought is an endless march without a goal. There is no summit on which she can stand and see in a single glance the infinite's whole. So I'll go back to the indent on page 349 and try to look in more detail at these mysterious lines. What are you asking?
Which page?
Page 249. In the middle, there's a kind of little indent.
Okay.
Page 249. Yeah. So of all these powers, these three powers, the greatest was the last. It's not the greatest power of mind, but out of these three powers with which the mind power begins her work, reason is the greatest. She arrives later in, we can say, in the consciousness of humanity, from a far plane of thought. Where has this power of reason come from? He doesn't tell us where it has come from, just a far plane of thought, but it's come into our world, into this packed, irrational world of chance, where all was grossly felt and blindly done. Yet the haphazard seemed the inevitable. Something that's done haphazard, it's done without much conscious arrangement. It's like throwing dice. What you get is just by chance. So it says what is haphazard, what is done just like that, seems to be inevitable. Into this world comes this power of reason. And the poet says she's squat, she's a small being. But she's a Godhead, she's a divinity. And she's also an artisan. She makes things. She's a kind of craftsman. She's come into this world of chance, and there it's as if there's a house ready for her, a narrow house built upon a ridge in time. The ridge is where there's a kind of edge of a line of mountains. So she's reached a certain height. It might be even quite a precarious height. The poet says that she's an adept of clear contrivance and design. Somebody who's an adept at something is good at it. He knows what to do and he can do it. So she has a certain skill. What she's good at is clear contrivance and design. She organizes things. He describes her as having a pensive face, a thoughtful face, with close and peering eyes. Like me, she has to screw her eyes up to see things clearly. But there, on that ridge in time, it's quite a big evolutionary step in consciousness, the arrival of reason. No? There she takes her firm and immovable seat. She's fixed there, she can't be removed. She is the strongest and the wisest of these three powers. He says the troll-like three. Trolls are figures in Nordic mythology who are born from the earth. And they have small, squat bodies. But actually trolls in the mythology are very stupid people. But she is not stupid. She has her tools. She's armed with her lens, her magnifying glass, and she has a measuring rod, and she has something to probe with, to go away from the surface into the depths. Using these tools, she looks on this universe, this objective universe, this universe that we see from outside ourselves, that we see outside ourselves. She looks upon this object universe, this universe that's full of objects and where we can look on things as objects. And she looked upon the multitudes, all the many different kinds of beings that live and die in this object universe. And she looks further, she looks out from this earth, she looks out at the body of space. She even looks out at time, the fleeing soul of time. As if time is always moving on and we can't grasp hold of it and stop it. But she can't grasp time, but she can take the earth and the stars into her hands to investigate, to try what she could make of these strange things. Here, to make of means to understand. What can she understand about these strange things? So she has a strong, purposeful, laborious mind. She sets aims for herself and she works hard to achieve them. To achieve her aims, she invents her scheme lines of reality. It's, I suppose, a way of examining the world. You organize it into categories and schemes to distinguish things from each other and to contrast things. And she has even an image of the geometric curves of her time plan. Geometric, it has to do with geometry, with ideal forms. So looking at the object world like that, she multiplied her slow half-cuts at truth. This term, half-cuts, to me it suggests dissection, cutting things to see what is inside. But people who work with geometry, they also do that. They take certain forms and then they think, what will it look like if I cut through it like this, or like this, or like this, or like this? I think that is what perhaps is referred to here. In her effort to understand, she does this kind of dissection and investigation. Reason is impatient of enigma. She doesn't like riddles and mysterious things. She's impatient with the unknown. She wants to know things. She doesn't want to put up with whatever in the universe is lawless, which doesn't fit in to her order, whatever is unique and outstanding. She's impatient with all that. What she tries to do is to impose reflection, the power of thought, on the march of force. This must be the forward march of the forces of the world, or the nature force which is creating the world. She wants this to be thought about, to be reasoned about, to be understood. She wants to impose clarity, what is clear and understandable, on this unfathomable world, this world which is so deep and mysterious we can't get to the bottom of it. But she does her best to try. She tries, she strives, she makes efforts to reduce to rules the mystic world, to be able to understand it in that way. The poet says nothing she knew. She doesn't know anything. But she hopes to know everything. Reason thinks that it should be possible for its power to understand everything. She works even in dark, inconscient realms where there's no light or of consciousness, realms that once were empty of thought. Thought never went there. But she's missioned, she's sent into those dark, inconscient realms. She's sent there by a supreme intelligence. She is sent there with the mission to throw that array of that light, of that supreme intelligence, on that obscure, dark vastness of the universe. That ray is still an imperfect light, and it's leading an erring mass, or a mass of beings and peoples and thoughts which are always making mistakes, but she tries to lead them by the power of sense. What can be touched and felt and smelled? What can we discover with the senses? And what can we discover with the idea? And what can be discovered by the word? So using those tools, she ferrets out nature's process, substance, cause. A ferret is a small animal. It's something like a squirrel, but it digs and goes underground to catch its prey. And you can send it, for instance, into a rabbit warren to catch the rabbits. So ferreting something out, it means like a small animal following its nose, going underground and finding useful things. So what she wants to do is using the power of that light of intelligence which has been given to her to ferret out how nature works, what substance is in nature, and above all, what cause, what is the cause? The power of reason struggles with these questions and wants to find answers. She's trying all life to harmonize all life by the control of thought. She's still struggling with this huge, confusing mass which is the universe. That's what she's struggling to do. She has come to save the world from ignorance. She goes on, she continues her work through the centuries. A sovereign worker, she's powerful and efficient. Through the centuries, she observes, reshapes everything that is. And she takes up this stupendous charge, this enormous responsibility that she has been missioned with. So then it's as if the poet is telling us, look, there, this figure of reason, low bent, but powerful figure sitting. She's bowed under the arc lamps of her factory home. It's a special kind of lighting they have in workshops, not very bright lights. Amid the clatter and ringing of her tools, she must have workers to help her. A rigorous stare in her creative eyes. She's seeing everything and insisting that things must be done in order. She is coercing, as if forcing the plastic stuff of cosmic mind, universal mind, into certain forms and shapes. She sets the hard inventions of her brain in patterns of eternal fixity. She's not impressed with this cosmic dumb demand that the universe is always making. She's not focused at all on realities that are too close, or the unspoken thought, the voiceless heart. Instead, she's leaning down to shape certain things. Her credos, her systems of belief, and iron codes, things that have to be done in a certain way, metal structures to imprison life, and mechanic models of all things that are. This is something about reason that bothers many people. They think that these structures which reason builds and these codes and credos, they are too rigid and they don't correspond to the close realities of life. No? But that's the way she is working. For the world seen, the world that we perceive with our senses, she weaves a world which is conceived. It's not perceived. It's conceived in the mind, in the reasoning mind. So in the reasoning mind, she's spinning in stiff but unsubstantial lines her gossamer word webs of abstract thought, her segment systems of the infinite. Gossamer, it's one of my favorite words actually. Gossamer is the beautiful silk that is spun by baby spiders. If you're lucky in the countryside in an early morning when there's dew on the grass, you can see a whole field that's covered as if by a shining silver net of silk, because each little spider, when it hatches from its egg, it spins itself a long thread that it uses as a parachute. With that thread of silk, it will float away to find its home. So he speaks here that what reason spins is a bit more stiff than that lovely gossamer. But the other thing about the gossamer is it's one of the strongest substances there is on earth. It's stronger than reinforced steel. And some of you might have heard me telling before that I have seen in a church in England that somebody had actually woven textile out of gossamer, and there was a painting of the mother and child. So it's something special, gossamer. But these gossamer word webs, we think of them as being extremely fragile. And of course, if we, like great bulldozers, push our way through the field, we will destroy them. These are gossamer word webs of abstract thought that reason creates. She also creates segment systems of the infinite. The infinite is limitless, but she wants to understand all that, whatever's going on in that infiniteness. So she makes mental systems of parts of the infinite. She makes theodicies and cosmogonic charts and myths by which she explains the inexplicable, what can never be explained. Theodicies are systems of belief about God and the role of the divine in creation. And cosmogonic charts, they're diagrams of the universe. And accompanying those, also myths, significant symbolic stories, which she uses to explain the inexplicable. We don't usually associate myths with reason, but if we are honest, many of our rational systems, they are in fact myths. Even our myth about the Big Bang or various things like this. They are like the stories which the ancient peoples would tell to explain why the universe is the way it is. So we're still doing that today. Myths by which she explains the inexplicable. And then she creates kind of maps out of these systems, these theodicies and cosmogonic charts and so on. At will, she spaces in thin air of mind as if she's hanging them up on a wall in a schoolroom, perhaps, like maps in the schoolhouse of intellect hung. And these diagrams and maps, they do explain things to a certain extent, but they force all the wideness of truth, the illimitable wideness of truth, into a narrow scheme that can easily be taught to children or used to convince the mind. She does this with her numberless, warring, strict philosophies. They are like so many different charts. They contradict each other. There are so many of them. And then she's faced with all the wonders of nature. Out of nature's body of phenomenon, of things and happenings, she uses thought's keen edge, as if it's a sharp knife, with which she carves out rigid lines. That all these theories have to run on rigid lines like tram rails or train rails, rails for the world magician's power to run on. These are all her sciences. So many different sciences, new ones created all the time. The sciences of reason, precise and absolute, but forcing wide truth into a narrow scheme. On the huge bare walls of human nescience, as if we were in a vast room where nothing has yet been written on the walls or hung on the walls, on the huge bare walls of all that we do not know of human nescience, She, what we do not know, is somehow written in nature's deep, dumb hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs is this wonderful old pictorial writing the Egyptians had, where mysterious shapes have meanings. Wonderful meanings. It's as if we look out into the world and all those hieroglyphs, all those signs are inviting us to understand what they mean. But reason doesn't go into those mystic depths of what those symbols mean. Instead, she pens in clear demotic characters the vast encyclopedia of her thoughts. Hieroglyphs are that old priestly writings of the ancient Egyptians. Later on, as reason perhaps became more dominant, they used a different kind of writing. It's called demotic. It's writing that anybody can read. You don't need to be a priest and an adept and an initiate to understand it. So it's because we have tablets from ancient Egypt where the demotic writing is given alongside the hieroglyphic writing that scholars have been able to decipher what the hieroglyphs mean or even sound like. No? So reason is doing that work of interpreting all the mystical signs. And reason puts her numbers, her unerring formulas. She's building all these things to clinch her summary of things. You want to clinch an argument. You're reasoning with somebody, trying to persuade them, and with your words and your thoughts and your examples, you want to show them that you must be right, to clinch your argument. No? And he's continuing a similar image. It's as if the universe, he says, is like a cosmic mosque. Inside mosques, we have also running around, usually the top of the walls, there's writing. There's writing of sacred texts. No? So on all sides runs, as if in a cosmic mosque, tracing the scriptural verses of her laws, of the laws of reason. She has written the daedal of her patterned arabesques. Arabesques are those typically Arabian Islamic forms and ways of writing, wonderful calligraphy. A daedal is a line of decoration that goes around the top of a wall. And in the mosques, usually, they are scriptural verses, beautifully done in calligraphy. So he says, these daedal lines, this is the art of reason's wisdom and the artifice, the artificiality of her lore, of her learning. This art, this artifice are her only stock, the only assets she has. In her high works of pure intelligence, in her withdrawal from the senses trap, reason tries to not be overwhelmed by the sense impressions, but to use reason to find out what is behind them. But in that effort of hers, in her high works of pure intelligence, in her withdrawal from the trap of the senses, there comes no breaking of the walls of mind. She doesn't break down any structures and let the light flood in from outside. There leaps no rending flash of absolute power, no lightning bringing high intuitive knowledge. There dawns no light of heavenly certitude. Those things don't come by reason normally. Here in our world, the knowledge of reason wears 1,000,000 different faces. And every one of those faces is wearing a turban like a question mark. It's turbaned with a doubt. All now is questioned, all reduced to nothing. Once monumental in their massive craft, her old great mythic writings disappear. There used to be these wonderful myths which were so convincing to people, but they disappear, and into their place jump up these strict ephemeral signs, short-lived mental formulas. Reason thinks that this constant change means progress. But the poet says, reason's thought is an endless march without a goal. There is no summit on which she can stand and see in a single glance the infinite whole. Reason cannot do that. That's its limitation. That is where I'll stop for today. It's not the end of this passage about reason. That continues, and we'll continue with it next week. Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.